I'm Aaron Kleidon of Scratch Brewing Company, and this is the All About Beer Brewer to Brewer podcast. My guest today is Noah Hopkins of Fulcra Brewing, and he's here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. First, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. And support journalism in the beer space. Check out allaboutbeer.com/support. We'll get into the conversation in just a moment, but first, this message.
Malteurop Malting Company is proud to introduce the new Malta Two-Row, grown and malted in Mexico. At Malteurop, they're proud to be growing and producing malt in Mexico. They work hand in hand with Mexican farmers to ensure the best barley, which is then processed in their own local Mexico malt house to create this exceptional Malta Two-Row. This product is a superior quality two-row base malt and provides consistent quality designed to satisfy your desire to brew a true Mexican lager. Contact Malteurop today and visit malteuropmaltingco.com. Next time you're going through your books, check and see how much you're paying for brewery software. Odds are you're paying way too much. Ollie is the fastest growing brewery software that is saving brewers time and money while delivering the tools they need to grow their business. Learn more at getollie.com/pod. That's getollie.com/pod.
Okay, let's get into it. A bit about my guest today. Noah and I have known each other for going on 15 years. We met at Local Option during my brief stint living in Chicago during the incubation phase of my brewery, Scratch Brewing Company. He was a bartender and home brewer at the time, and they had just formed Local Option Beer Worker. They were nomadic brewers and scaled up Noah's recipes at other breweries around the Midwest, such as Dark Horse and Against the Grain, to name a few. After a fork in the road, he decided to go back into coffee, which was his first passion, and became the production manager at Dark Matter Coffee. While there, he was instrumental in many coffee beer formulations and would also travel to Guatemala working on coffee fermentation projects. He's taken a winding and somewhat strange road to brewery ownership, but is now extremely close to opening Fulcra Brewing in Sawyer, Michigan. So with that, Noah, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how you doing, Aaron?
I'm great. I'm really excited to talk to you today. I think as a brewer, and I think you've done just about everything in the brewing world, and you've even played a brewer on TV at one time.
Yeah, I've
So,
I've
yeah, go ahead. I'm
I've
sorry.
oh no, I've winded my way around it, this being my ultimate goal, and so yeah,
Yeah,
good.
I was thinking back to the time, kind of when we first met. You were working as a bartender at Local Option in Chicago, and that was definitely one of the I would say one of the great places at the time to have craft beer. Did you start homebrewing before you were working there, or how did that work, so to speak?
No, I hadn't. I mean, I was very into beer. Um, I always had friends that were older than I was, and I got into beer buying. There was a place in college that would let you buy beer illegally, and I would uh, usually buy Bush or Bush Light. And but when I was feeling like I wanted to have a special night, I would buy some European beer, and I had Schneider Weiss, and it blew my mind away. So
Nice.
I would have my friends. I'd look on the internet and find things and be like, if they have this at the store, buy it for me. Um, but at that point in time, I was working in coffee. I was working for Intelligentsia Coffee, uh, and then my friend Tony Rusmato bought Local Option, and I had worked with him at Pequot's Pizza, which is a pretty famous Chicago institution. Um, and yeah, so I ended up going and working for him and realized he wanted to turn it into a beer bar and that I knew a lot more about beer than anyone else that was working there. So we teamed up and started working on that. And in the meantime, one of our good friends, JD, who was a regular and had just graduated from Siebel, was like, "Yeah, we should brew together." And we uh, we kept talking about it and talking about it, and then we went to the Windy City trade show and had too much to drink and ended up going back to his house and getting his brew rig and carrying it about a mile from his house to the local option and started brewing out on the back porch.
Well, there you go.
Um, so I didn't really come to home brewing in a very traditional fashion. I was kind of taught by somebody who had already been brewing home brewing and went to brewing school um, for 5 or 6 years. And so, yeah, so we started brewing in the back of there.
What kind of beers did you brew early on?
Um, our first beer that we made was we were trying to make a German pale ale. So it's just all noble hops and German all yeast. And, it turned out pretty good, but, I wasn't just fumbling by on my own. I had a very good teacher. Um,
We're
so we
oh, go
did
ahead.
that. I have kind of a funny story. We used to brew out back, and to speed it along, we had really good burners in the kitchen at local option, and so we would try to heat up our water on those, and then cart it through the kitchen and out to the back. Um, and one day I was doing it, and it caught the ball lock and just poured all over my crotch. Um,
There's
and
probably better places to spill hot water, I would think.
Yeah, yeah. So I didn't no permanent damage, but we called that beer the Hot Pants Pale Ale.
There you go. Um, were there were there a couple of beers that you remember pouring as a bartender at local option that were just like you were so excited to have them in, or people really lined up for them? It's kind of I don't know. I think it's kind of nostalgic to think about some of those first beers that people were really excited about that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, we were uh in that guard that was pouring not only like European beers, because at the time, we're talking 2009, 2010, there weren't, you know, Half Acre was, I don't even think their tap room was open yet. Their bottle shop, I don't remember, open in 2010, 2011. You had Peace, Goose Island, Two Brothers in the Suburbs, Rock Bottom. But as far as beer in Chicago, there wasn't much. Everything was coming from, somewhere else in the US. And we just really gravitated towards the importers. And in 2010 during Craft Brewers Conference and World Beer Cup, we were the headquarters for Shelton Brothers and had 30 Shelton Brothers beers on draft. And so it's really hard to really pin down a certain beer uh, that really blew me away. But, at that time, having Cantillon on draft and uh, Struce Panapot and all those, McKellar for whatever it has become, him doing his Z series and all his single hop beers and stuff were pretty progressive at the time, and were pretty influential on me uh, as a brewer and on my palate.
So after a while, you guys began the kind of the nomadic brewer thing through local option, and uh, you brewed at quite a few breweries. I know you guys traveled around and brewed the beer yourself at all these other breweries. What were some of the breweries that you brewed at?
So the way that started was Tony Rusmano, he owned the local option, and then we started local option beer worker as partners on the brewing side. But before we actually started the action, our nomadic brewing, he had the idea of doing brewery bar collaborations. So we would um, make a, a recipe or and collaborate with the brewery, and then they would serve it at their tasting room pub, and then we would have it at local options. So it was a way for us to have an advantage and have an exclusive beer that no one else could have from these in-demand breweries. So our first one was called Dortmunder Einfall, and we brewed that at Three Floyds when they still had their original system in the corner. It was a little 7-barrel system with Grundy tanks, and that kind of kicked it off. And then we started brewing with Sam Cruz and Jerry Nagy of Now Against the Grain, but at the time they were the brewers at the original Bluegrass Brewing Company pub. And we made 2 or 3 beers with them there. And then they started Against the Grain, and we were starting to tinker with the idea of doing our own beer concept. So they were definitely our first brewery that we brewed our beer at. I think we were like the third or fourth batch they brewed at Against the Grain. And then we brewed at Central Waters and Dark Horse. We did a lot at Pub Dog, which most people have never heard of. George Humbert is a great guy. He actually, the way we got into that whole system was through Brian Ewing at 12% Imports. Brian Strumke of Stillwater was brewing there, and then they moved his production to Two Roads in Connecticut, which had a much bigger system, and we took his space.
Gotcha. Did I imagine all that time you spent at other people's breweries over the years and doing collaborations, it probably helped you figure out kind of what system you wanted to have ultimately in your brewery.
Yeah, it's, over time, yeah, it's pretty interesting to look at the way people do things and don't do things, and what you like and don't like. And um, so yeah, it was always interesting to visit another brewery and not just get a brewery tour and get to hang out and um, be involved in a full brew day and see the ins and outs, and ponder what the upsides of this type, because everybody has people might be in a certain tier, but they all have like, there's a type of thing, and what is their goal.
Yeah.
So it was always interesting to see those type of things, and it was always interesting to see what's important and what's not so important as well.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that totally. Um, so um, after the local option and your time there, um, I think I probably have spent more time with you in the coffee and dark matter coffee phase of your life. And
Yeah.
I thought it would be interesting to talk about. Maybe you could guide us through this, but are there some similarities in how coffee is like fermented versus malt?
um kind of, but it's more, uh coffee would be more akin to like cacao. You know, malt is
I
more,
guess
yeah,
I guess I was curious. I knew you did quite a few like fermenting experiments
yeah.
with coffee, and are the raw beans after they're harvested, they are fermented, correct? To uh,
Yeah,
what's that process like?
for sure. And that's what I was trying to sort of like figure out how to pivot and explain is just, most people don't realize that coffee is fermented, but that fermentation process isn't, the end goal like most people think of, unless you're talking about now you have kimchi and other food products that in pickles and but as far as traditional fermentation, people think of creating alcohol, but that is it's a process to make the beans stable to be able to be exported. But so basically, it's a cherry and it has two beans in it, and it's got tons of sugar and pectin in it. And so if it is allowed to just sit, a lot of wild bacterias and yeasts and things like that, spoiling bacterias will start to consume it. And then that will penetrate into the porous surface of beans. So it has to get off the mountain as quickly as possible and then go down to the mill where the cherry, um, which is called cascara once it's dried, and the mucilage, which is the sugary pectin part, get separated. So, I mean, I could go into lots of detail about, natural process, pulp natural or
Gotcha.
honey, but most wash process is what most coffee is. So it goes through either a dry mill or a wet mill, and then goes into a fermentation tank. And most of all of that fermentation is done naturally. It's done the same way it's been done for, hundreds of years. So those tanks are full of the type of bacteria that strip off those sugars, but don't create off flavors within the coffee. And then that's washed off, and that's why they call it a wash process. And then it's dried either on a patio or in a basically like a big roaster, a big air dryer. And then it's dried to a certain moisture content and it's stable
I gotcha.
and can be bagged to be either sent to.
Now, what were some of your coffee fermentation projects that you did in Guatemala?
Yeah, so when I started at Dark Matter, they had already been Giorgio Bersani, who's the producer that his family owns Finca San Geronimo. He's very curious. He's been into mead making for a very long time. The agricultural process that they employ is very insane. And so he was very interested in alternative fermentation and had already started tinkering around with trying to use wine yeasts and things like that. And so when I got there, I just was looking at the processes and just was like, I really wasn't sure how the cell counts were high enough to impact the flavor. I think there was some manipulation, but I was like, we really need to ramp this up and figure out how to dose these appropriately to completely take over. Because it's like, if you do co-fermentation with two different types of beer yeast, if you have a saison yeast and an ale, American ale yeast, that saison just gonna take over and just crowd out and take over that fermentation. And that natural yeast and or bacteria that was present in those tanks has been there forever. So it's just like it's the dominant yeast in that scenario. So Um, so yeah, so my whole idea was like, let's do beer yeast, let's do and because we're like, it's at the base of Vulcan Etidlan, which is uh, it's really cool. It's on the backside of Lake Atitlan, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my entire life. Um, and the reason uh, their farm was so prosperous is because they had a wet mill. They had this water from the lake flowing through the volcanic rock and down the mountain, and and then to their mill. And they actually also had like hydroelectric um, generators and were completely self-sustained. But that's aside from the point. Um, but yeah, so nonetheless, they were very into experimentation and trying new things. So because of the climate and where we were at, I figured doing Belgian yeasts and things that fermented at a much healthily at a much higher temperature would be the way to start um, that project. And then we eventually went into doing Brettanomyces. And then we started bringing hops and doing basically like dry hopped fermentations, and then some with yeast, some with hops, stuff like that. And just really trying to drill down and figure out what worked, what didn't. So
Is that around the same time you guys started barrel aging coffee beans at Dark Matter?
yeah, they had started doing um, they had started barrel aging a couple of years prior to me being there, but it wasn't necessarily a steady project. I got there, there's a lot of things that are right place and right time. Um, they're very, that was right after I started was a time when there was a big focus on it. And Dark Matter has always had a really big relationship with Half Acre and has, did big hugs for, I don't know, 12 years or 14 years, very, very long time. Um, and they had just emptied a bunch of barrels of gin pony pills, and they were all in 15-gallon kegs. So they had like 12 of them. And we did a company wide competition where everybody got a keg and you could put whatever, any type of cultivar of coffee in the keg. You could drain it, not drain it. You could pick out how much, the amount of beans you put in, how long you put it in for. Like basically any variable was possible. And me and my friend Will, who now owns a coffee shop outside of Seattle, we won, and he became the barrel master guy, and I became the production manager, and then that was when it really started to be kind of a focus and trying to find consistency and find out like what what percentage of moisture do the beans need to be at going in, what percent do they need to be coming out, what can you roast them at, what cultivars work with what, so it started to become more of a scientific project as opposed to um, just a fun project once they promoted him to be in charge of that project.
Gotcha. Um, so I know while you're at Dark Matter too, I know that you guys were traveling all over the place doing beer collaborations as well. I would see you at Sheldon Brothers beer festivals. I would see you at all the big beer events. It seemed like you guys were everywhere. So,
Yeah.
what were some of your favorite, I guess, breweries that you had worked with coffee and beer collaborations?
Yeah. I mean, so that, I went to dark matter I'd become friends with Jesse and Aaron and a lot of the people at dark matter while I was at local option and making morning wood. We used dark matter coffee for that beer. And so we became pretty close. And so when I left, I was just like, I'm going to go back to coffee and figure out what I want to do. And I didn't really plan on being there very long. Um, but it, had all these opportunities to travel, and it was such a fun place to work. And um, doing that kind of intense production was very interesting. But at the same time, another thing that really kept me there and why I just um, didn't want to leave was because of being quasi still involved in the beer community and still having those relationships while I was there and doing those coffee beers and festivals and all that stuff. Um, so yeah, I mean, um, I would say, doing the Shelton Brothers Fest was a big highlight. I had done the first 2 years of the Shelton Brother Fest as local option in Worcester, Mass, and then up in Portland, Maine. And then we got invited back via Michael Menton um, when Dauntless held it in Louisville. And it was just such a fun thing to do because nobody had ever had like a full blown coffee shop at a beer festival before and had espresso machines and iced coffee and all the fun barrel aged beers and or cask conditioned beers. And so that was always a highlight. But as far as like straight up coffee beers we did, um, I would say, uh, not to toot your horn, but getting to come down and hang out with you and brew beer, and then us trying to like roast coffee over an open fire and the epic failure that was and how hard it was. It's like, I can't hold it any longer.
Yeah, the little popcorn popper thing that we
Yeah.
wasn't
But it's,
wasn't ideal.
I mean, at the end of the day, the whole thing was about collaboration and education and information sharing. And, whenever everybody I was with that came to do a beer got to walked away and knew more about beer than they did walking in, that was really awesome. And so, that obviously happened with you. Um, and I would say like doing the Revolution beers were always my favorite because they really, really made sure that we were involved and that education and um, cross education happened. Um, Marty Scott usually led those and um, was very stringent on making sure they were double blind, and we would try. Um, there would be definitely lots of selections and stuff like that, and um, so yeah, those were always fun, and they were always really good beers. And
So this is an easy one here. Do you have like a favorite or like a style of beer that you think coffee works the best with, or one that you not necessarily that it works the best with, but do you have a favorite kind of coffee and beer style, we'll say,
um,
or a beer that stands out? I mean, it's I don't know.
I feel like it makes sense. I think it takes a lot of experimentation to push the boundaries. Having those complementary flavors of like a stout or a porter makes sense. It takes a lot of experimentation to get outside of that zone. Uh,
I mean, I think it's
so,
pretty hard. It's pretty hard to beat uh, a good robust porter or a a stout with coffee in it that's well done. You can
Yeah,
really
and I just think you can also take those flavors and you can push the boundaries a little bit more with them. Um, uh, and go into that natural process realm and get some fruitier flavors. It's the whole thing to me is just taking two things uh, that taste similar but different and putting them together and creating a completely different flavor that doesn't taste like either of them. That's when I feel like it's been a good coffee beer when you pull out completely new flavors out of the finished product.
cool. I think we're going to take a short break for this message, and then we'll come right back for more of this conversation with Noah Hopkins of Fulcro Brewing.
It doesn't matter what size your brewery is, 1 barrel or 1,000. Maybe you're in planning. Whatever the size or situation, Ollie has helped brewers save money and become more efficient. The best part? When you're talking to the Ollie team, you're talking to people who have worked in the industry. Learn more about Ollie and how it's transforming breweries everywhere at getollie.com/pod. That's getollie.com/pod. Malt Europe Malting Company is proud to introduce the new Malta Two-Row, grown and malted in Mexico. At Malt Europe, they're proud to be growing and producing malt in Mexico. They work hand in hand with Mexican farmers to ensure the best barley, which is then processed in their own local Mexico malt house to create this exceptional Malta Two-Row. This product is a superior quality two-row base malt and provides consistent quality designed to satisfy your desire to brew a true Mexican lager. Contact Malt Europe today and visit malteuropemaltingco.com.
Welcome back. All right, Noah. I know that you're in the process of opening your own brewery currently.
Yes, long
I'm sure that's a whole lot of fun. I think yeah, I've repressed those memories a long time ago, but maybe you can enlighten me. Who knows? Perhaps the process has gotten easier, but I am not for sure. So
No, I doubt it.
how's that going? Are you you're not regretting your decision to jump in, are you?
No, I mean, I think a balanced, willful ignorance and exuberance is needed to start the process. Um, I think if you knew everything you did, you can apply that to a lot of things in life. Um, but if you knew the whole story, there would probably be a little bit more trepidation and uh, uh, but yeah, I mean, and I just think that we both did it in a similar fashion and kind of much more DIY and bootstrapped and on a shoestring budget, and it's not easy. It's been a long road, and the things that you think you don't know.
Yeah, usually
Um,
there's somebody pops out of the woodwork and says, "Hey, you're doing this wrong. You need to do
yeah,
this. You should have done this sooner."
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's I don't know, I feel like that's all the hard stuff, and once you get open as a brewery and you can actually enjoy what you're doing, it's really I think that's the hardest part.
yeah. And it's
There's
just interesting because it's like I've been in this construction phase for so long, and it's become work. It's been what I am doing with my life. And so it's just like switching that gear and being like, oh, I'm brewing beer and I'm uh have to figure out everything for the bar and all the other side of things that I've done, you know.
Yeah, you can learn as you go.
Well, but I mean, I've done it before, but it's
Yeah.
just reawakening those skills. It's like, even working at Dark Matter, I started off as part-time barista, part-time production manager, or part-time production before I became the manager. And, you know, that was I helped out dark matter at Riot Fest last fall and was pouring coffee and was just like, wow, I haven't done this in 10 years, you know? So it's just dusting off those, it's just switching those gears, and
I,
changing that mindset.
yeah. I'd like to ask you to describe well, how you came up with the name Fulcra Brewing and basically the if you could describe the location of your brewery. I think that would be pretty nice to hear about.
Yeah. So the original name I wanted to have was Fulcrum Brewing. But my business partner, Ty Webb, is a patent attorney, and um, he quickly figured out that there's a Fulcrum winery, and you know, messing around with trademarks and stuff, it's a close enough industry that that was basically kiboshed pretty quickly. Um, so Fulcrum is the plural of fulcrum, and I think it applies a little bit better anyway, just because we want to be one of the fulcrums. We want to be the fulcrum of beer for the people in Southwest Michigan. So the name, it just implies balance, and you know I tend to gravitate towards more sessionable beers. I've been that way for a long time, but as I get older, and a lot more people that got into craft beer when we did and are around our age are starting to get into more sessionable beers. But I just want to make balanced, drinkable beer, um, and just the whole thing, balance in life, not letting one thing overtake the other. I think is pretty important in general. Um, so yeah, so that's the name and kind of the direction. I also think that beer education is really important, and I think that when we came up in beer in the early 2000s, there was uh, there was a lot more of an array of imports and different styles, and I think there a lot of things have gotten pigeonholed into a very few styles being represented in the market, and being able to, like you do, and educate people um, on whatever you're doing. Like I want to tell people why I brew the beers I do and call out the breweries that were influential, just like you asked me earlier. Like I have no problem telling somebody why I'm doing what I'm doing and what inspired me to do it. And I think that's a really important part of um, being a taproom purveyor to me. Um, but as I said, it's in Southwest Michigan. We're on Red Arrow Highway in Sawyer, Michigan. So just uh, 10 miles north of the Michigan-Indiana border. And we're very lucky. Our property is right up against a neighboring a neighbor who has about 30 or 40 acres of mostly wooded property. Some of it's blueberry patches and wine grapes and stuff like that. So, um,
Now, was the building you were in, it has it's an older building as well, right? It was
yeah,
it built in the 19 teens or 20s, is that right?
I think the main building was built in the late 30s, early 40s. Um, and the original building on the property that we call the annex, that we're still trying to figure out how we're going to utilize it. Currently, we're using it for storage, which isn't ideal, but we want to utilize it. It was a fruit stand in the early 1900s, and that was the original building on the property. It's a really cool building. And then this building became a restaurant that the farm owned. And so, in the 40s, 50s, it would have been like a farm to table restaurant. Uh, and then I think it sat vacant for a long time and became kind of derelict. And um, then a couple opened a woodworking shop and showroom in the property and had it for 30 plus years. And we bought it from them.
Um, what's the size of your brewery that you're of the brew house that you went with?
We have a 5 barrel Blickman electric brew house.
Um, what was the reason for the electric on the brew house? I'm just curious.
Um, well, my business partner and I. So to give a little backstory on that, Ty and I met at Local Option. He was one of the first customers I met when I started there in 2008. Um, and he had been homebrewing for about 5 years at that point. Um, and he said, I want to open a brewery someday. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Because, uh, we had started Local Option Beer Worker and that was going well. And that's what I thought I was doing. And so years later, when I was at Local Option, we remained friends the whole time and started brewing beers together again. And just said, hey, um, do you still want to open a brewery? And he's like, yeah. It's like, me too. It's like, where would you want to open one? He's like, Southwest Michigan. I grew up going there every year as a child. And so I was like, yeah, that's where I'd want to do it too. But nonetheless, he had a 15-gallon electric system that he built with his dad. And his dad worked at AEP for 40 years. And I brewed on his system, and it was so easy and so like the control and um, uh, being able, he had a Herms coil that goes through the HLT and could do step mashes and all this stuff really easily and set temperatures. And so we were talking about it and um, doing things on uh, it just made sense to what we wanted to do.
Nice. Um, and are you primarily selling beer to go out of the tasting room?
Yeah. I mean, with a 5 barrel system, that's, kind of the goal in this area is a very summer tourist driven area. I've been spending a lot of time getting to know all the other brewers around here and the locals, and there's just awesome people and great community. Um, but uh, during the summer we'll be very busy, in the winter not so much. So um, I think uh, it'll be that back and forth kind of like I think you've dealt with, of trying to balance that sales on premise and then being able to package and sell when possible outside. So I would like to can some beer and sell some draft here and there, but it's not the main focus to start.
Um, you guys have you've got a couple rooms that you rent out right next to the brewery as well, correct?
Yeah,
Or will
thanks.
be renting out.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten really lucky. So that's kind of a
Uh,
fun thing to bring up because the previous owners put them in as they got older. The whole building used to be their showroom, and as they got older and were making less furniture, they just wanted some added income to supplement and pay their mortgage. Um, and so Yeah, they were already turnkey when we bought the property. So if we didn't have those, the amount of time it's taken us to do our build out, we would have been quite difficult without them. So we want to like rebrand them and call them Brew and Bees, and have been
There you
trying to
go.
figure out how to incorporate them.
Yeah, I think I know with Scratch we're kind of far out there too, so we that's something I wish maybe we had a little closer places to stay because after yeah, people drive out and they have a couple drinks, uh it's not the best case scenario to have to drive somewhere. So
No, for sure.
it's really nice being able to offer your guest a room.
Yeah. And I mean, I definitely, that's definitely something I'm excited about, but like selfishly, I'm really more excited about like having people like yourself and other brewer friends come up and make beers and be like, hey, you got a place to stay. And, being in a less populated area, just having that amenity. And I'll be like, you stay in the rental unit, I'll pull out my cot and sleep in the brew house or whatever.
Um, I know recently you've gotten to start brewing some of the beers and get ready for an opening coming approaching soon. Uh, what are some of the beers that you've brewed or are looking forward to brewing uh, in the next in the lead up to the brewery opening?
Yeah, so just learning the system and trying to figure out efficiency and volumes and all of that stuff. I started out with just a super simple uh, recipe with a cream ale. Um, and the first two beers I brewed, I've never brewed before. Um, I just wanted to make them something that I couldn't critique too hardly. As I'm trying to figure out everything, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. So yeah, that turned out pretty well. Obviously some notes, but and then I did uh, a Rockhow Pale Ale. Hop Alliance actually has New Zealand Rockhow and then a Michigan grown version. And so I did a 50-50 single hop pale ale with that, which I like quite a bit. I want to start doing, I'm going to bring my one barrel home system here and start over mashing so that I can do my full 5 barrels and then do like a 1 barrel side beer and do like different yeasts or,
Nice.
put
Yeah,
some,
we do stuff like that quite often.
yeah.
It really helps us in the same amount of time you can generate another beer
Yeah.
and without like you had stated with the seasonality of where your business is located, it's kind of important to be able to stockpile variety when you're able to.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And so like that one was like me, I did 50-50, but I would love to do like one with just the New Zealand and one with the Michigan. And again, like I said, with that education component, and be like, which one do you like better? What do you think of this and that? And just like really drill down on like what those different growing regions are and what, the impact and, things that people are like, I like IPs and pale ales, but they know the flavor profile they like, but they don't actually, you know the backstory of a hop or why it is what it is, or you know what I mean. So I think that'd be a fun educational experiment, but also being able to, to be honest, to be able to like grow up some yeast. Like if I want to do, being as small as we are, getting a pitch of yeast could be half as much as the malt and the hops for the beer. So if I could grow up a yeast and do a 1 barrel batch and then do a 5 barrel batch of something else with the same yeast, that I think that would be pretty beneficial as well.
Yeah, I think from a financial standpoint, um, I think yeah, that would go a long way for you. Um, I know you yeah, just a small brewery and kind of doing it a lot of DIY stuff. I mean, you do have to maybe do a lot more than one would think to make everything fall into place and work.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
if anybody would know, you experimented with what worked and what didn't, and grew at a pace that worked for you, and figured out what systems worked. And I think,
yeah, and I'm not 100% sure it works, but we're still doing it. I mean, it works, but it is rather interesting from time to time. And you
yeah,
figure it out as you go. And uh, I know I'm really looking forward to coming up when you get open. And I wanted to thank you for doing this podcast. Yeah, like I said, I'm really looking forward to having your beer, and I think that all the experience you've had to lead you up to this point, I mean, I think it's all really interesting, and yeah, I mean, you've just the time you spent as a nomadic brewer, and then the time at Dark Matter being the production manager, and then also being a bartender. So having that face-to-face interaction with the customers on a daily basis, I think is very important too. So I think a little bit of all that stuff is going to go a very long way in your brewery. So thanks a lot. I look forward to making it to Fulcra Brewery. Um, Noah, he'll be back next on the next episode of this show as the host, having a conversation with the brewer of his choosing. That'll be on the air in 2 weeks, so make sure you tune in for that. A reminder, allaboutbeer.com/support. I'm Aaron Kleidon of Scratch Brewing Company. Thank you for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast.
Malteurop Malting Company is proud to introduce the new Malta Two-Row, grown and malted in Mexico. At Malteurop, they're proud to be growing and producing malt in Mexico. They work hand in hand with Mexican farmers to ensure the best barley, which is then processed in their own local Mexico malt house to create this exceptional Malta Two-Row. This product is a superior quality two-row base malt and provides consistent quality designed to satisfy your desire to brew a true Mexican lager. Contact Malt Europe today and visit malteuropemaltingco.com. This episode was proudly brought to you by Ollie, the brewery software that could save you massive amounts of money and time, just like we did for hundreds of brewers like you in 2024. Make 2025 the year you switch to Ollie and discover why it's the fastest growing brewery software trusted by thousands of brewers across the globe. Visit getollie.com/pod to learn more. One more time, that's getollie, OLLIE.com/pod. Cheers.